A billionaire laughed at the orphan's crude sketch, dismissing it as nothing more than childish scribbles. But what he didn't know was that this simple drawing would soon reveal a secret that would change everything. Jordan Thompson had everything: money, power, respect. But something was missing. When he walked into the orphanage expecting to be unimpressed, a boy's sketch caught his eye. A simple drawing, but something about it felt different. The staff laughed at the boy's work, but Jordan saw something in those lines, a reflection of a hidden world. The boy's eyes told a story of pain, hope, and a secret that Jordan couldn't ignore. The sketch was more than just art. It was a message. That night, as Jordan stared at the sketch in his office, he saw it. The boy had drawn his father, the man who had once cared for him, before disappearing. A part of Jordan's past he had, buried for years, was now staring back at him. The drawing was a key, unlocking a long-forgotten piece of Jordan's heart. The boy wasn't just an orphan. He was a mirror to everything Jordan had lost. The sketch wasn't just a picture. It was the beginning of Jordan's redemption. Days turned into weeks, and Jordan found himself visiting the orphanage more often. What started as a simple drawing led to something much bigger. He started to see the world through the boy's eyes, and in doing so, he began to heal his own wounds. And then, one day, Jordan knew. The boy's sketch had changed him. He wasn't the billionaire who dismissed the world around him anymore. He was someone different, someone who could love, someone who could heal, someone who could give. In the end, the sketch wasn't about talent. It was about a connection. A billionaire who thought he had everything realized that the greatest wealth he could ever possess was love and forgiveness. The boy had given him the gift of redemption. A billionaire, jaded by years of wealth and power, laughed dismissively at the orphan's simple sketch. He saw nothing but childish scribbles, a sign of a world far removed from his own. But what he didn't know was that the innocence in those lines carried a hidden truth, one that would force him to face a side of himself he'd buried for years. Jordan Thompson had everything a man could want: money, luxury, respect. He was a man who lived in a world where everything could be bought, where every desire was fulfilled before it even formed. But what he didn't have was a heart that truly felt. When he entered the orphanage that day, he expected to feel nothing. The last thing he anticipated was to be moved by a child's naive creation. The boy, no older than 10, stood before him, clutching the drawing with hands that trembled. He had spent hours on it, pouring his limited understanding of the world into those innocent strokes. Yet the billionaire saw nothing but a mess. "This is nothing," Jordan sneered, brushing it aside, unaware of the deep emotional weight the sketch held for the orphan. The boy, though hurt, didn't say a word. His eyes spoke a different language. Eyes that carried a lifetime of abandonment and longing for someone to see him, to care for him, to understand him. And Jordan, too distracted by his own arrogance, missed it. But as Jordan sat alone later, that evening, his gaze fell on the sketch once more. This time it wasn't just a drawing, it was a window into something much deeper. The child's innocent depiction wasn't random. The boy had drawn his father, someone Jordan had once known, a figure from his own past, long buried beneath years of ambition and success. It was a simple thing, a sketch done with innocence, yet it connected them in a way Jordan couldn't explain. The boy's gaze, once filled with quiet sadness, had mirrored a sorrow in Jordan that he hadn't acknowledged in years. The sketch was a story of loss, longing, and the hope that perhaps, just maybe, someone would notice. Jordan couldn't help but feel the weight of it, the weight of a life wasted in pursuit of things that didn't matter, and a heart that had turned cold over time. The boy had innocently drawn the missing piece of Jordan's soul, reminding him of a love he had forgotten. Days passed, and Jordan found himself drawn back to the orphanage. He wasn't there to critique the art or to flex his wealth. He was there to find something he hadn't realized he was missing: connection. The boy, in his innocence, had shown him a part of himself that was lost: the ability to care, to feel, to be human again. The sketch had shattered Jordan's defenses, forcing him to confront the raw, unguarded emotions he had locked away for far too long. And soon, Jordan wasn't just seeing the boy's innocence. He was seeing his own vulnerability reflected in those wide, trusting eyes. The boy, who had so innocently given Jordan the key to his heart, had unknowingly offered him the greatest gift: the chance to heal. In the end, the sketch wasn't about artistic talent. It was about the power of innocence to break down walls. What began as a laugh at an orphan's humble art ended with a billionaire rediscovering the purest form of love, the love of a child, untainted by the world, and the healing of a broken heart. The orphan's innocence had healed the billionaire's soul, showing him that the greatest wealth wasn't in riches, but in the love and forgiveness that comes from a heart unafraid to feel. A billionaire hardened by years of wealth and self-indulgence sneered at the orphan's simple sketch. To him, it was nothing more than childish nonsense, clumsy lines that seemed unworthy of his attention. But little did he know, the innocence behind the sketch would awaken a moral reckoning in him that would change his life forever. Jordan. Thompson had everything: power, influence, and the ability to control anything with a snap of his fingers. Yet despite all his wealth, he was empty inside. He had built his empire on the backs of others, made deals that traded human lives for profits, and never once questioned whether his actions were right or wrong. To Jordan, morality was a concept for the weak, something to be ignored in favor of ambition and success. But everything changed the day he entered the orphanage, expecting to find nothing but a group of children who had nothing of value to offer. That was when he saw the boy, a quiet, shy child who had spent hours on a simple drawing. The orphan stood before him, nervous but hopeful, as he handed over his art, a sketch of a man, deeply thoughtful and remarkably familiar. To Jordan's eyes, it was just another poorly executed drawing, nothing more than a crude attempt at art. He dismissed it without a second thought, mocking the boy's effort in front of the other children. But what Jordan didn't realize was that the boy's innocent sketch carried the weight of a profound moral lesson, a lesson that would soon hit him harder than any business deal or stock market crash ever could. That night, as he sat in his opulent office, Jordan found himself inexplicably drawn back to the drawing. He picked it up, studying it in a way he hadn't before. The boy had drawn a figure that was unmistakably his father, the man who had once been a part of Jordan's life before disappearing into the abyss of his past. The child's innocence, his lack of understanding, had unknowingly drawn a mirror to Jordan's own heart. The sketch was not just about a father figure, it was about a lost connection, a moral foundation that Jordan had ignored in his relentless pursuit of wealth. The child, through the purity of his actions, had shown Jordan something he had buried for years: the importance of love, family, and moral integrity. The sketch was a silent plea, a call for Jordan to re-examine the choices he had made, the people he had hurt, and the values he had discarded in favor of his empire. It was a call to awaken to the truth that no amount of money could fill the void in his soul. As the days passed, Jordan's visits to the orphanage became more frequent. Each time he found himself seeing the world differently, through the eyes of the boy, whose innocence had never been tainted by the corrupt world Jordan inhabited. The boy didn't understand the complexities of business or the power dynamics that governed Jordan's world, but he understood something far more important: compassion, kindness, and the ability to forgive. Through the boy's eyes, Jordan saw what he had lost: a sense of morality, a sense of right and wrong. The boy's simple, untainted view of the world forced Jordan to confront the truth. He had lived his life ignoring the moral compass that should have guided him. He had sacrificed his humanity for the sake of his ambitions, and now that cost was weighing heavily on him. Jordan realized that the true measure of success was not in the wealth he had accumulated, but in the people he had helped, the relationships he had nurtured, and the integrity with which he had lived his life. The boy's sketch had shattered Jordan's hardened exterior, forcing him to acknowledge that his life, though filled with riches, had been empty of meaning. It was time for him to change, to rebuild not just his business empire, but the man. He was at his core. The sketch had become a moral awakening, a lesson in humility, compassion, and the importance of making things right. In the end, the sketch wasn't about art. It was about redemption. It was a reminder that no matter how far we stray from our true selves, there's always a chance to awaken to the values that matter most. The boy's innocence had reminded Jordan that true wealth lies not in power or possessions, but in living a life of integrity and love. The laughter in the room echoed, but the boy's eyes held something deeper: an innocence, a vulnerability, and a silent plea that Jordan Thompson didn't yet understand. He thought it was just another piece of childish nonsense, nothing more than a distraction from his day. But as he glanced back at the drawing that night, something inside him shifted. The lines on the paper, once so simple, now seemed to carry a weight he couldn't explain. He picked up the sketch and studied it in silence. The boy had drawn a figure of a man, with eyes so familiar, eyes that were a mirror of his own father. The realization hit him like a tidal wave. The boy hadn't just drawn a man. He had drawn the father Jordan had lost years ago, the father who had once loved him before the bitterness of wealth and ambition clouded his heart. The boy's innocent sketch had revealed a piece of Jordan's past he had tried to bury for years. A piece of him that still longed for the connection and love that had once filled his life. He felt his chest tighten as memories flooded back. Memories of a time before the money, before the power, when his father had been his hero, when they had laughed together, dreamed together, and shared simple moments that now seemed like distant echoes. The boy's drawing, so full of innocence, had cracked open a door that Jordan thought he had closed forever. He had forgotten what it was like to feel loved, to feel needed. In that moment, Jordan realized how much he had sacrificed, how much of his humanity he had lost in the pursuit of success. The boy, with nothing but a simple drawing, had shown him the truth, that love, family, and connection mattered far more than any fortune he could ever accumulate. The room felt colder now, the laughter from earlier still ringing in his ears, but it was replaced by a painful truth. Jordan put the sketch down, his hands trembling. The walls around his heart, built over years of ambition, began to crumble. He wasn't just looking at a child's drawing anymore. He was looking at the face of the man he once was. Innocent, unbroken, capable of love. The tears that had been buried for so long threatened to spill as the weight of everything he had, lost, pressed down on him. In that small orphan boy, Jordan saw the chance to redeem himself, to reconnect with a part of his soul he had forgotten existed. It wasn't about wealth or power anymore. It was about love. The boy had unknowingly given him the most precious gift of all, an emotional awakening that would change his life forever. And as Jordan made the decision to return to the orphanage the next day, to see the boy with new eyes, he knew that the road to redemption wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only path that would truly make him whole again. The boy's innocence had broken him open, and in that brokenness, Jordan found the first seeds of healing. In that moment, a wave of protectiveness surged through Jordan. The innocent boy, standing there with his simple sketch, had unknowingly shattered the walls Jordan had carefully built around his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that the boy needed him, that the boy's quiet vulnerability called for someone to step in and fight for him. Jordan's gaze hardened with determination. He wasn't just going to walk away this time. He would protect the boy, give him a chance, a family, and the love he deserved. No amount of money or success could fill the void he now felt. It was time to right his wrongs, and nothing would stop him from giving the boy the future he'd always deserved. The air in the room grew thick with tension as Jordan stared down at the orphan's sketch. For a moment, everything felt suspended in time. The laughter, the mockery, all faded into the background as the boy's innocent drawing held his gaze. A chill ran down Jordan's spine, and he couldn't explain why. He had dismissed the sketch earlier, but now it felt like something more, like it was trying to tell him something he wasn't ready to hear. As the boy's image of a man, his father, stared back at him, the truth slowly began to unfold. The boy's drawing wasn't just an innocent attempt at art, it was a revelation, it was a message, a hidden connection. Suddenly, Jordan's past came rushing back, memories he thought he had buried long ago. The man in the drawing was someone he hadn't thought about in years. Someone who, despite his mistakes, had been the one person who ever truly loved him. Without conditions. Jordan's heart raced. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. He had ignored the lessons his father had taught him. The importance of love, loyalty, and family, sacrificing it all for the empty pursuit of power. And now, in front of him, stood an orphan who had unknowingly brought those very lessons back into his life. The boy's innocence had triggered a shift inside Jordan, a shift he couldn't ignore. With each passing second, the tension built. But so did something else, an overwhelming surge of determination. Jordan knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He'd made mistakes. He had hurt people. But he also knew something else. The boy had given him the gift of a second chance, a chance to rewrite the story of his life. He could be the man his father had wanted him to be, the man who could love without fear. He stood up, his eyes filled with a new sense of purpose, the weight of the moment still heavy on his shoulders. The suspense of what lay ahead was undeniable, but so was the inspiration it sparked within him. Jordan Thompson, the billionaire who once lived only for himself, was now ready to step into the unknown. He wasn't just going to save the boy, he was going to save himself. And for the first time in years, he felt truly alive, knowing that redemption was no longer a distant dream, but a reality he could reach for. Jordan Thompson stared at the orphan's simple sketch, once mocked, now revealing a deep connection to his past. The child's innocent lines brought back memories of a time when love and family meant everything. In that moment, Jordan felt a shift within himself, a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He had spent so long chasing wealth, neglecting the relationships that once mattered most, but the boy's drawing awakened something inside him. The road to redemption was clear. It wasn't about power or money anymore. It was about love, compassion, and the chance to rebuild what he had lost. Jordan knew what he had to do. He would return to the orphanage, thank the boy, and offer him a future full of love and opportunity. He would start over, not just for the boy, but for himself. The journey wouldn't be easy, but with newfound clarity and purpose, Jordan stepped